Are you one of those people that constantly feel tight or restricted, yet spend hours and hours stretching and foam rolling without getting the result that you want? I'm JJ from Strengthnu, your fitness and therapy experts, and we're here to talk about some of the myths surrounding mobility. So first, let's make the distinction between muscle shortness and muscle tightness. Tightness is more of a perception dictated by the neuromuscular system. It's essentially your nervous system sending a message to the muscle to have an increased tone. Whereas actual muscle shortness is when a muscle fiber changes its structure due to injury, possibly surgery, or habit. We call this adaptive muscle shortening. If a joint is stuck in a certain position for a long enough period of time, the muscles around it will adapt to that position. This can also be caused by certain neurological disorders as well. So this is one of the cases where those longer bouts of static stretching, SMR, possibly manual therapy can be highly beneficial. Not that I don't prescribe static stretching for tightness, I absolutely do. You just don't have to spend hours upon hours doing it. So a very common example of this perceived tightness is the feeling of tightness in the hamstring when performing the hip hinge. If you can't get into the proper hip hinge position, but you can easily touch your toes and kick your leg up to the sky, then possibly you have to look at lack of stability in other places in the body or positioning. So one of the tests I like to use is the active straight leg raise test. I'll ask someone to lay down flat on their back, point their toe towards their head, and lift their leg up as high as they can. All right? So usually when people lay down, they're in this position where the ribs are flared out and they'll probably feel tightness in the hamstring right about here. Ideally, you should be able to get around here. So this can be an issue of stability and positioning. So if we add a little bit of stability, cue proper positioning, I get you to take a deep breath and drop the rib cage and hold that. You can even add a little bit of extra stability. I'll take this, hold that straight up, and get her to perform the test again. All of a sudden, you can find that she has all of this range. So in that case, that perceived tightness was caused by a lack of stability and an underactive core not holding the trunk and pelvis in the proper position. So in this case, hours of static stretching probably won't do anything. So now let's look at what's actually happening when we stretch. We're essentially increasing the tolerance to a particular position. Now, is this something that we actually want? Will it improve our performance in the gym? Well, it really depends on what we're doing. If we can't squat to a decent depth or perform a hinge properly, this will obviously limit the effectiveness of those exercises and possibly open you up for injury. So in this case, static stretching pre-workout may help. Now, someone out there is going to cite the studies that show a decrease in power output following bouts of static stretching. This is where the sort of myth of no static stretching before workouts comes from. These studies looked at the vertical jump immediately following long bouts of static stretching. They had the subjects hold for upwards of a minute and then immediately go into a vertical jump. And they noticed a slight decrease in top end power output. And this is not reflective of how we really warm up in the gym. It has been shown that these decreases can be mitigated with a dynamic warm-up, something more specific to the activity about to be performed. So from an injury prevention standpoint, static stretching should not be used as a standalone. It's very dose dependent and the dose is highly individual. Now, there is such a thing as too much mobility. Hypermobile people are set at a slightly higher risk for injury than hypomobile people. The reason being is now they're responsible for controlling this larger range of motion. So building strength through the muscle's end range is very, very important. So a good way to build strength through these ranges is eccentric loading or loaded stretches. All right, so going back to the hip hinge, one of the things I like to use is a modified, lightly weighted RDL or stiff leg deadlift. So I'll have someone set up in their normal deadlift stance. I'm gonna elevate the toes with small plates. All right, I'm gonna cue him to keep a slight bend in the knee, neutral spine, keep the upper back tight, and he's gonna go down until he feels the first level of resistance. All right, so say he feels it right there. I'm gonna ask him to take another deep breath in and slowly come back, go down deeper into the stretch. I wanna do this 2, maybe 3 times until they find their end range. So I'll have someone do that 2 or 3 times prior to actually deadlifting to help increase the range of motion and create control throughout the whole movement. Hey guys, so remember, stretching is important. You just need to know how and when, or even when not to do it. Consider all the factors, take into account the activity you want to perform. I'm JJ from StrengthNU, and remember, you're just one strategy away from crushing your fitness goals.